First off, I'd like to state that Jesus Christ has told me that Zack Knight is the Antichrist. This knowledge has greatly influenced how I feel about Zack Knight. When I signed the contract with Zack Knight on November 13, 2012, I had no idea that Zack had embedded into the signature line below his signature the following words: "By signing my name above this line, I hereby agree to tempt, sexually arouse, and thrill Gail brain to brain. I know full well that no means yes." Then Zack embedded into the signature line below my name this: "By signing my name above this line, I hereby declare that Zack Knight has the world's most impressive penis, and I invite him to give me brain-to-brain loving." First off, the size of a guy's penis has never been of interest to me. Like most women, I don't care. I care much more whether the man loves me and whether he's manly and honorable. So I'm going to read you a list of what I find attractive in a man. I'll be doing that in a video that you can see. Okay, before I go off into the list, I want to just go over this treaty here. This is the treaty that I signed with Zack Knight in the middle of November. And I'm just going to let you take a look at it. Now look here at the bottom. See that signature line? You can't tell that there was anything embedded in there. I most certainly didn't know there was anything embedded in there when I signed this. That's Zack Knight. Right there in that line right there is where he embedded that message. And here on this side here, it was embedded right in there. I had no idea that was in there. You see how tricky this guy is, man? Why would I find a guy this deceitful and tricky attractive? The answer is I don't. I most certainly don't. Okay, what I'm going to do is, instead of reading a list, which is kind of boring, I'm just going to just go over what's on the list and discuss why. You know, I did make a list in 2002 about what I find attractive in a man, and Zack Knight is just, he just doesn't meet the, and that list is pretty accurate. I made this list in 2002. So instead of reading you're welcome to go to my website and check out the list. It's, the list is at my website. It's entitled, let me see here. I'd like to say something, though, about a guy's, like I said, a guy's penis is not a big deal to me. This list I wrote in 2002, and my tastes in men have not changed. My ideal man is Jesus Christ, because he meets everything in that list that I wrote. So you might think, well, if Jesus is your ideal man, you must dream about loving him all the time. Well, you know, I see Jesus as so manly and awesome that to make love to him would be like a sacrilege. I love Jesus by obeying him. And this is a love that's greater than sex. And he's going to repay me by thrilling me with his semen in the millennium, using Brent Spiner as my lover. This isn't Jesus loving me through Brent. Rather, it's Brent loving me using the semen of God. Now, Jesus understands sexual passion, but as God Almighty, he cannot make love to a woman. And I understand and respect this. But Jesus often caresses me with his spirit, and it's a loving that is far more awesome than sex. For Zack Knight to try to cheapen God as one who would make love to a woman like he did to me in February 2012 is a real turnoff to me, because I love my Jesus, and I'm just really insulted that Zack faked his Jesus in February 2012 and tried to demean Jesus into a human being, portraying Jesus as a crybaby and somewhat womanly. I feel very offended for Jesus about this. Jesus was furious, and he aborted all the babies that Zack made in me through this telepathic loving that he did. And Zack lied and claimed to be Jesus, and he said that he would impregnate me and he would keep the pregnancy on hold till the millennium, and that he did this to prevent the Antichrist from making me pregnant. What a liar he is. I have never forgotten how treacherous Zack Knight was in this instance, and I have not forgiven him for this because I can't trust him. I never flirt with him, Instead, when he makes moves on me brain to brain and I know it's him, I tell Jesus to go kick him in the balls. The link for what I find attractive in a man is at my website, GabrielleChana.com, and it's entitled Jesus Christ Considers Me His Favorite. And I'm just going to go over the qualities that I find attractive in a man and how Zack Knight fails. Even though Zack Knight is passionate, he's passionate like Satan is passionate. And you know, when Zack was leader of the Jesuits and he was willing to kamikaze himself and the Jesuits into the Gail android, that is probably the only time I've ever found him attractive. And I said, I love you too right now, Zack. But I'm sad to say, is not typical of my feelings for Zack. And yes, Zack Knight he's not really manly. I mean, he's the leader of the Jesuits, so I guess that's like manly, but he's not manly where I care about manliness. He lacks honor, he cheats, he's not loyal, he doesn't care about the suffering of innocence. And, you know, to me, no man can be manly if he's disloyal to the most masculine man in the universe, who is Jesus Christ. So, you know, Zack Knight's life ambition is to betray my manly hero, Jesus. And for that reason, Zack Knight, to me, is a disaster as a man. All true masculine men will honor Jesus Christ because Jesus is the epitome of manliness. Anyone who tries to oppose Jesus is a failure as a man. So Zack Knight's a failure because he is the arch enemy. He's Jesus' arch enemy. And, you know, and you know what, one thing that Zack Knight really lacks that means a lot to me, he doesn't have any character or dependability. You know, how can anyone... I trust this guy. He lies so much. I couldn't depend on this guy for my life. I mean, look at him. He tricked me into having brain-to-brain loving with him by faking his Jesus in February 2012. This shows you how treacherous and deceitful he is. I never find a treacherous and deceitful man attractive. He is the opposite of the character and dependability that I long for and need to feel. I got to feel safe with my man. And I don't feel safe with Zack Knight. He is the opposite of character and dependability. He's the opposite of Jesus Christ, who is character and dependability. And, you know, maybe Zack doesn't have any bigness of heart or generosity. These are really important qualities to me in a man. How can anyone be big of heart and generous when their life's goal is to betray the being that is the most big and generous being in the universe, Jesus Christ? Zack Knight's life ambition is to destroy Jesus Christ and take his place. I despise him for this because I love Jesus. And I think Jesus has the biggest heart and is the most generous person around. And Zack Knight didn't go to the cross as a perfect being without sin to die for my sins so that I could go to heaven. How dare he try to usurp the authority of Jesus, who's the most vast and awesome being in the universe. I despise Zack for this. And yes, maybe Zack is a genius, but he uses his genius as Satan incarnate. And you know, I got to say something. Jesus told me that Zack Knight is the Antichrist, and this influences how I feel about him. And I just don't feel safe loving the Antichrist. It makes him horrifying. How can I find the Antichrist attractive when I know that in the future, because I know the Bible, you know, I know Bible prophecy, he's going to use his brilliance to deceive the nations and rule the world as a fake Jesus. And then when he does this, he's going to put to death the true believers in Jesus by cutting their heads off. His brilliance is horrifying and scary. I prefer older men too, and Zack Knight is a young upstart. And I don't like a green upstart for a lover. Another thing that's really important to me is I like my men to be balanced. I don't like fanatical extremists in a man, fanatical extremism in a man. Zack Knight is very off-balanced, and he's too obsessed over his sexuality and his sexual prowess. I could care less about a man's penis. I care more about what's in a man's heart and soul. Zack Knight is so obsessed with the flesh and the penises and the sexual act and sex organs. I think he's disgusting. We're as opposite as night and day in our sexual desires and how we like to express our loving. My greatest obsession is to love and honor Jesus. I'm really obsessed with spirit love. Zack's greatest obsession is to love and honor Satan. How can evil and good get along? How could evil and good find each other attractive? And you know, Zack doesn't have any greatness. He doesn't care about justice or human rights. He doesn't have the courage to follow through on his convictions. Like, I think when he kamikazed himself into the Gail android, that was just like an emotional thing for him. And he got over it really quick, and now he's back to the real Zack. It's kind of really disappointing. He's an absolute failure as far as being a great person. He's the Antichrist. When he comes to power, the only human rights there will be is you got to serve and honor him, or he'll execute you. I find him terrifying. I can only love greatness, like the greatness in Brent Spiner and Vladimir Putin when they were willing to crash the Church of Gail into the Jesuit fleet in order to prevent the Jesuits from using some sort of a sex machine on everybody on the planet. And you know, Zack Knight had group sex with Brent Spiner when Brent was taken over by his clone with Laurie McBride, and he participated with the Jesuits to try to have me executed in the trial in Quebec, Canada in August 2011. You think I'm going to trust a guy like this? The only time I found Zack attractive is when we were fighting the Gail android, and he was willing to sacrifice his life along with the Jesuits to try to spare Earth from her wrath. Because this showed concern for, you know, the inhabitants on Earth, but unfortunately, that wasn't the real Zack. I don't know, something came over him emotionally, but now he's back to his true self, which is rather, he's just back to his lying, deceitful, sexually obsessed, vulgar self. I never find lying or treachery attractive in a man, and I would never ever tease him about any of this as a way of flirting with him. Like I said, these moments of greatness with Zack are the exception, not the rule, so he's unattractive to me. Again, Jesus Christ is my biggest hero, and nobody's as great as Jesus, and Zack's life goal is to usurp Jesus, and I think he'd be happy if Jesus died. And you know what? I really don't like this about him. That's pretty low. Anyone who would treat Jesus like this is somebody you can't trust. He's not great to betray a being who is as vast and awesome as Jesus. And yeah, Zack has a sense of humor, which I find, you know, I like a guy with a sense of humor, but he can't laugh at himself. He likes to laugh at everybody else. He takes himself far too seriously. He's got a huge oversized ego, which I find nauseating. And he takes too much pride in his penis. I think, good grief, so it's the size of a penis that determines a man's greatness? What a shallow guy. By the way, my men have informed me that Matthew McConaughey has a small penis, which I really could care less about. The guys seem more worried about their penises, like they measure them and all this other crap. You know, Matthew's a very sexy guy. He has honor and manliness, and, you know, the penis is irrelevant. If the head and the heart are right, we'll make the penis work. That's how I feel. You know, and I like a guy who's going to love me with a genuine concern for my health and welfare, and who wants to love me with tenderness, depth, and sensitivity. Zack, sensitivity? He's vulgar. His sexual jokes make me want to puke. I find them nauseating. He stole a nude from my men's collection, and he made a still of it and kept it in his pocket. He treasured it. A very vulgar picture that is now making the rounds online because the Gail android stole it from him. The fact that Zack chose this particular still of me is a real turnoff, because that picture does not represent who I am. And it seems to indicate to me that what he finds attractive in me is some delusion or fantasy he has about me that is most definitely not who I am or who I want to be. He's an absolute failure in loving the real me. He loves some sexually vulgar and shallow illusion he has of me, and he doesn't love the deep and spiritual woman that I am. You know, he's disgusting. He made brain-to-brain loving with me by impersonating Jesus, impregnating all my eggs. That is not loving me with tenderness, depth, and sensitivity, what I long in a man. It's exploiting me for selfish purposes. I would have been ruined if Jesus didn't abort all the babies that he made. Oh, yeah, I mean, he's given me a deadly yeast infection that would have killed me by now if Jesus had not intervened. And you might say, well, you forgave him for the yeast infection. Well, we were in a life and death situation with the Gail android, and he was on our side. And, you know, when you're fighting for your life, you kind of, like, lay everything aside and